Ambassador Haile rightly says the enemy we had to fight was so formidable that getting rid of it consumed a major part of our energy. Therefore, we could not prepare. Indeed, we built a very efficient fighting EPLF. A highly effective military was an absolute necessary not only for our success as Eritreans, but also for our survival. There was no other way out in the case of Eritrea. No serious negotiations was being held between the Derg and Eritrea or EPLF. Thus, the only way was to bring a total liberation. And the only liberation movement in Africa that succeeded only militarily was Eritrea, was EPLF. And of course, I do not need to explain to everybody how that happened because we are all now. But the EPLF was not only a military organization. It had a civilian side to it: health, education, infrastructure, agriculture, and on the political side, mobilizing and organizing the people. And it also promoted a beautiful vision, a vision of a peaceful, democratic society in which everyone can contribute and prosper. It was this vision, as far as I'm concerned, that its members believed in and fought for. In independent Eritrea, it says, this is the EPLF charter that came, alongside from, that developed from the congresses. It is our basic desire to build a stable political system which respects law and order, safeguards unity and peace, guarantees basic human rights, and is free from fear and oppression. A democratic constitutional system based on sovereignty of the people, on democratic principles and procedures, on accountability, transparency, pluralism, and tolerance. It's a beautiful vision. And this is a vision that kept many people to fight. Many people who came from different walks of life. People who were not pushed to go to fight. People who would have fantastic life somewhere else. There was a vision. What happened to that vision? Unfortunately, that fantastic vision depended absolutely upon a strong military to deliver independence. And therein lies the fatal contradiction. You have this absolute military organization and you have this fantastic vision. How do you marry these two? How does the liberation movement, which is so utterly dependent upon its military, deliver this vision? Can it have that vision? How does that happen? It's something very, very, interesting. Tragically, it was this vision and the hopes that Eritrea fought for that were betrayed. The need for absolute discipline took precedence over the need for democratic debate to develop collective vision and concrete ideas about our future after independence. Immediately following our extraordinary victory, there were important attempts to implement that vision. The most important being drafting of the Constitution and adopting of the Constitution of 1997, drafting election laws, and attempt to reform all the laws of Eritrea, all the laws that we inherited from Ethiopia. There were attempts, but far from giving way to a new democratic rule. The culture of absolute obedience and military superiority continued to dominate Eritrean society after victory. That militarism continued. All attempts to establish institutions of democracy or democratic safeguards that were essential for this vision were quashed. Anybody who attempted to move towards building those institutions or even debating were either put in prison or had to flee the country. So where are we now? Where do we go from here? At present, Eritrean society and economy has virtually disintegrated. Fight of youth across the borders has complicated the demography with huge implications to social and economic development. Isaias's divide and rule policies and practices, even among his own people, his own generals, his own whatever, meant absolute one-man rule. This opening that provided by peace with Ethiopia has been squandered, and now Isaias himself is thoroughly discredited because there is no excuse now. There is no border. In the eyes of Eritreans, Isaias cannot stay in power any longer. What do we do? So what happens when Isaias is no longer? How can democratic changes be instigated, and by whom? It's important to take challenges faced by both domestic and foreign if we really want to go forward. Domestically, our limited experience with open democratic dialogue and practice. Never had that. You can go back and seriously will see the deficit in our history, starting from Italians, British, and like that. We have a fragmented society or social order, ruined economy, paralyzed institutions, and absence of practice of civil or civic participation in matters of society. Civil servants in Eritrea, resorting to corruption, to, or contraband to augment their income. Lawlessness abounds, even human trafficking in Eritrea. A frightening and dangerous situation of desperation. People are desperate. Acute contradictions in society, everywhere. Conflicts and divisions surfacing in our society. Externally, we live in a regional system or dynamic that militates against stability and peace, with lack of strong and deep democratic culture in the region. The current ethnic-based tensions, unrest, and sporadic eruption of violence in Ethiopia might affect us. That's where we are. Continued state of weakness in Somalia, in South Sudan, terrorism, spillover effects in the region, and potential foreign intervention. We have the Saudis, we have the Emirates, we have Egypt. Why not Ethiopia? There could be. We got to prepare for it like that. And all this can have their impact in the country and on any transition that we can potentially, move forward, because this can create chaos, confusion, violent conflicts, which might usher extremism of various types. What possible scenarios post Isaias? Who can take over power from Isaias? It's impossible to predict what might happen and why, and why. In general, anything can happen anytime. Are we prepared? Eritrea is faced with a situation where freedom of association, expression, and exchange of opinion, especially as a group, is absolutely denied, preventing collective reflection, let alone systematic planning and concrete preparation for post-Isaias. That does not happen. So how do you prepare? Under circumstances, the military alone can take over, or senior military commanders and senior party officials. Not that they care about the country, but more for self-preservation, for individual interest, because they have committed a lot of crimes and they know about it. And however, we are faced with a military situation. Though the military might take over, we are faced with a military institution, that is weak, that is falling apart, and that is distrusted by the people, and that distrusts each other. Or can we think change provoked by civil disobedience, although organized civil life is non-existent, no student group or movement, no professional association, no social clubs like in the Sudan, for example? I would also like to point this out. The process by which a system is replaced and the conditions that prevail afterward often determine the framework and process of stable or unstable transition and democratic or non-democratic governance. How the system, one-man rule, is replaced will dictate what's going to happen. If the military comes, it's a different thing. If civilians come, different thing. We need to think about that. Then I would like to go into that call for national conference of Ambassador Haile, because he says or suggests that we call for a national conference of representatives of the Eritrean people that would decide on a transitional arrangement to ensure an inclusive process of building participatory democracy in Eritrea. And he says that's the only way to avoid chaos, conflict in the country. As important as it is, I don't think that's simple. I don't think that's simple, because it raises many questions and requires careful preparations, including practical steps. Who can organize such a conference? Who identifies the participants? More importantly, who identifies the challenges that this, national conference has to engage in? What is it going to talk about? Of course, when is this National Assembly going to happen? Today? Tomorrow? After the fall of dictatorship? It's important. But talking to Ambassador Haile, he says that this national conference, should be held immediately after the fall of the dictator. This national conference that Ambassador Haile suggests will have to contend with post-dictatorship and post-conflict situation. Post-dictatorship and post-conflict, because really it's only a few months ago, or 9 months, that we are free from conflict. We've been in conflict all the time. So we got to take that into consideration. A transition also from a long period of state of no war, no peace, an authoritarian system, a highly personalized rule, and an exclusionist state. We want to move to a peaceful, stable, democratic polity, and an inclusive state where the rule of law is supreme. How do you do that? This transitional council or People's Assembly, whatever we call it, really to look into how to establish or re-establish, we had one, a functioning government. That's very important. Build a free and fair political rules and systems, and of course institutions. Develop civil society and a robust legal infrastructure that fosters public confidence in the institutions of government. Do we trust the police? But we have to trust the police. The courts, do we trust them? But we have to eventually trust them. And all the different institutions. People who come from there tell you no ministry functions. People go and sign, and the interesting thing is now, because people are disappearing, they are asked to sign 4 times a day now. But nobody cares, right? So what happens is that people disappear and they sign for 4 days on the 5th day. They go on Friday and sign for 5 days because nobody cares. So that means that nothing is functioning. We have to examine structural institutions or patterns that have or might have inevitably arisen from a long and persistent authoritarian or dictatorial rule. For example, rule by security apparatus. That is what is actually in Eritrea, not the civilian institutions. We also have to address crimes that have or might have been committed during the period of dictatorship. Healing potentially lingering hostility, and divisions within society so that reconciliation can take place. We need to address that. In short, the creation of the conditions that require for a democratic governance and an open society should take root. In addition, it needs to prepare this conference to address post-dictatorship issues of freedom, safety, and well-being of the individual, dignity and self-realization. Okay. And we also have to look, what does transition mean for the lives of the people, for the region, and also like that. We have to look into that. Repression and its consequences. Okay. How to move forward in 1.5 minutes. The question again arises, are we really, even those who are outside, in diaspora, our professionals, our politicians, are we really adequately prepared for change, for stable, peaceful, democratic transition? Haile says that's very important. Or are we going to say we need to, we could not really prepare because we in the diaspora, for example, been consumed by fighting the dictator in Asmara? Is that all? Would that be acceptable? Therefore, I suggest that we need to develop analytical framework for key, priority issues of transition. How? It has to be knowledge-based. It has to be properly developed. We got to prepare issue papers and discuss it and debate it and disseminate it in different languages. B, strengthen civil groups, the youth and especially women, to engage in stable transitions, in transformations, of course in peace development, not only within Eritrea, but within the sub-region as well as the region. This we can discuss now. And through this promote informed public discourse, advancing understanding on transitions, on peace building, on democracy and development, and all that like that. Now, it's easy to say all these things. How? How do you implement this? And of course, there are many other ideas. How do we implement? What are the mechanisms of implementation? What institutions exist at the time? Now, I would like to, since we are here, challenge Eritrea Focus, of course in cooperation, in collaboration with others, to act as the hub, as the organizing institution for all this. Because we have to define research papers, we have to translate them, we have to disseminate them, we have to bring our intellectuals, our politicians together to discuss this. Who can do it? I'm challenging Eritrea Focus to do it. And I could go on that. This challenge that we have is enormous. Time is a luxury that we do not have. And demand from our people is for immediate result. Thank you.